I'd like to call the budget workshop session. The order asks you to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone. Some new faces tonight. That's always a pleasure to see. And for our regulars, thank you once again for being here and taking it all in and joining in with us as we get through this little dilemma we're facing. I have a statement here I need to read just to remind everyone of tonight's meeting. We need to remind everyone our meetings are recorded and are accessed for future viewing by the public. All conversations at the meeting may be picked up through the microphone used to record the board's discussions during the meeting. Please be cognizant of this throughout the meeting. I thank you. I will now call the meeting to order. If you already have, and turn it over to Mr. Staten.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I'll turn it over to Mr. Collin for his budget presentation.
Okay. Call this presentation up. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Staten. All right. So tonight's presentation is mostly a review. We have very little new information, as you're well aware. We're kind of waiting on the state government to tell us what their final number is going to be for our state aid. I just kind of want to review things, some discussions that we've had over the last few weeks between the last board meeting. Maybe there's some misunderstanding of what I'm trying to convey here as far as 5.5%, what that gets us, what we still need to do, even with the 5.5%. So a lot of review, but that's where I'm starting tonight. Board of Education, you do have all of this in front of you. I'll try not to stand in the middle of everybody's way, but we usually do. This is the budget as we have it right now, which includes some positions that had not previously been in here as a result that had been funded with grant monies that were made available through the pandemic. Now, this budget, $26.8 million, it does reflect a reduction in our state aid from our original number of $15.5 million. The governor released her budget on January 16th, gave us a lower state aid figure than we expected. So that was the big adjustment from our original numbers, which in effect increased our tax levy. So our tax levy went up, understanding that that won't be the final tax levy. On January 16th, the night that the governor had released her budget, we gave our first presentation. At that presentation, we put forth a budget, and the board agreed that we would go out with a 5.5% tax levy increase. So the 5.5% tax levy increase would help us to preserve some of the programs, namely reading, math, and guidance that were initiated during the pandemic. Okay, we know that at the end of 23-24, the year that we're in now, some of that money from the federal government goes away. So we will need to backfill that in order to maintain those programs, and that's where the 5.5% comes from. I told you the four positions, the programs that we've talked a number of times about. Right now, I'm going to have the other administrators talk a little bit about what those positions do for us since they've been implemented. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Bashini and any other principals that need to speak.
So this is just some information about the specific programs that we're looking at. Title I reading, the positions in the middle school. That was implemented the very first year that we received the COVID funding. So the 21-22 school year, 147 reference, or 147, 134, and 143 reference the total number of 5th and 6th graders in the middle school for those years. And then you can see the percentage of students that have been serviced. You know, so it's roughly a quarter of of those two grade levels that are being serviced. And I wanted you to see, you know, beginning of the year numbers, end of the year numbers, so that you could see that the numbers drop because kids are receiving service, and you know, kids are making progress and making their way out of that service. That Title I reading program, you know, they're very busy. They're doing screening on the entire 5th and 6th grade 3 times a year, checking reading levels, making sure kids are staying either at benchmark where they need to be, and also making movement. If they're in a specific tier, they want to make sure that they're moving into the next tier up. Kids are placed in different tiers. Some get every other day service, some get daily service based on the levels that they fall in. So there's a lot of collecting data on students at multiple points throughout the school year, but you can see that there's a lot of kids being serviced. Keep in mind, this never existed before we received this initial funding. Some additional services that, that Title I is providing. Title I initiated on their own a Reading Buddies program that is a collaboration between the elementary and the middle school. Middle school students are going over to the elementary school to read and you know, teach really kids about literacy and enjoying books. So, you know, the middle school students are developing self-confidence, leadership skills. The younger students are benefiting from further literacy development. Title I reading also assists with the weekly after-school study halls, supporting kids developing skills, homework completion, studying for tests, things like that. There's also some push-in taking place to some of the ELA classes, just the way the schedule lined up. And it's really great to have someone with a strong literacy background pushing into an ELA class to support students reading and written language-wise. And then also providing additional ELA resources to the middle school building as a whole. You know, materials, strategies, and that's across the entire middle school building, not just 5th and 6th grade. So the ones that are highlighted in yellow are things that are new that we've never been able to provide that before. Title I math. This service is covering both the elementary and grades 5 and 6 in the middle school. This program came along, or this position came along the 2nd year into the COVID funding. So we have, you know, 2 years worth of information here. And you can see, you'll see that it notes in the 22-23 school year, a Bridges program was used. And then in the following, this school year, there's a new Number Worlds program being used, which I think that's jockeying the numbers a little bit. So you can see that for 22-23, you know, the numbers are a little bit lower than for this current school year. I think that the Number Worlds program has a very solid screening process, and it was, you know, it was year 2. It was more methodically rolled out, and I think it was able to capture more kids that required the service. That is also measured beginning of the year, end of the year. So obviously we don't have the end of the year data yet. That's a large amount of students being serviced, you know, for math. And it really covers things like math fluency, which is across every single grade level that's going on for years and years. It seems like we're always working on math fluency. And then also support of grade level concepts. And kids, again, are placed into tiers based on, you know, where they're at, what their level is. So some kids are receiving more intensive supports than others, but you can see that's a huge amount of students being serviced.
Can I just jump in with the Title I reading, and it applies to math too. You know, we're lucky. That's probably the only good thing I can think of that came out of COVID for our school district is the funds that we got. I mean, everything else, as we know, wasn't really helpful. It's detrimental. But Tracy and myself, you know, we advocated for years in our budget meetings before this came forward to, you know, bring in Title I. I know Tracy has been talking about for years to get Title I up to our 5th and 6th, because they really should have it. It's not an extra thing. It's something that was absolutely missing. So this isn't and I don't think anybody here feels this way. I just need to say it. It's not like icing on a cake. It's part of the cake, and it's something we really need to keep. That's what I would advocate, because 23 to 25% of our kids, we're getting this tiered specific instruction. They cannot get that in regular classroom to this level. It's just not possible.
And I also want to say, you know, for the amount of time that we had these programs in place, you know, 3 years for the reading, 2 years for the math, it is nothing short than impressive what has been put in place in that short amount of time. You know, usually it takes a while to like develop a program, roll out a system. I mean, I'm super proud of what they were able to accomplish, and the structure to it. It's not a loose service. It is very data driven. You know, so I think that should be noted. Title I math, these are additional supports also, our Title I math position. They're also functioning as an instructional tech coach on the union audit committee, part of the new teacher orientation program on both the math committees and in both buildings. And then also supporting the Playville Library tutoring, which we love, by the way. Thank you. The counseling position that is in both the middle school and the elementary school. And I say that because by regulation, we're required to have each building have access to a counselor, not just a social worker, but a counselor. So that's why it's critical for the elementary school. You know, before this position existed, we only had a social worker in our elementary school. We didn't have that component. You can see, I just wanted you to know that in the 21-22 school year, that was coming right off of COVID. So CSE students are those that have an IEP, they're under special education. The non-CSE students are just additional students that struggle and need additional counseling supports for a variety of social and emotional reasons. You can see that year right after COVID, it was a large amount of students being serviced. Also within that very first year, that counselor was also facilitating kids up here in the high school. So there was a lot of action, and that the counselor also covered the entire high school caseload during maternity leave. So that was a lot of students being covered. Keep in mind that students that have an IEP that has counseling on it, we are mandated to provide that service. That's non-negotiable. And then also for the 22-23 school year, and then also for this current school year, you know, the counselor is also making weekly, bi-weekly contact with parents, setting parents up with services in the community, making MCAT calls and referrals on students that are significantly struggling. You know, you need people to be able to provide that service and to provide that follow through in the assistance for families. On this slide, again, I want to highlight that anything that's in yellow are things that we have never had before, never been able to provide. So you can see that in the elementary, middle, and district-wide, there are a lot of additional services being provided by this counseling position. In the elementary school, kids that require behavior plans, the counselor is helped develop that entire process and facilitate start to finish, so that we have, you know, oftentimes when you're trying to implement a behavior plan, if you don't have someone that is case managing that, it falls apart. So the counselor is following that process start to finish. Social emotional lessons, pushing into classrooms, assisting the teachers with making sure that they are embedding those lessons and those soft skills into their classroom instruction just on a daily basis. You know, if you're reading stories about kindness, if you're reading stories about, you know, collaboration, things like that, just making sure that those pieces are really highlighted. Also, coordination with SAVA. SAVA in the high school very much functions, you know, with like career exploration, internship, shadowing, things like that. In the elementary and the middle school, SAVA is supporting us with additional SEL lessons, career planning lessons, overall soft skills. And so the counselor is very instrumental in coordinating that. Also, I'm going to jump down to the middle school because some of these overlap with each other. In the middle school, the counselor is responsible for individual career plan assessments, and I'm saying absolutely individual. Every student is met with individually. There's a whole form that's filled out, strengths, interests, possible career choices, and that's the counselor is doing all students grades K through 6. District-wide, the counselor has been instrumental again in working on that comprehensive school guidance plan, and that's constantly evolving, so she's part of that process. And then also the district suicide plan. So I just wanted you to be aware how many new things we've been able to implement, solidify, continue to monitor with the addition of this position. Any questions?
Thank you. I just want to add, as she stated, these, and as Mr. Madden stated, these, although they're new positions, it's because we had new funds. We just didn't have the funds to provide these positions before, but they're necessary, and as Mr. Stevens said, these are the most intensive needs of our students. I mean, these are our neediest students, and these are the ones that we're going to be without if we can't get the funding and the budget where we need it to be. And you can look at the numbers that these teachers service. This math teacher, 500 students we touch again, and that teacher is, I see that teacher outside of dismissal and knows every student's name. That teacher has integrated itself in the fabric of the community. So as Mr. Ben said, they're part of the cake. I don't know if it's the flour, the sugar, or a couple of cracked eggs, but they're necessary ingredients to what we're trying to build in the district.
And I feel when you say that it is our most, fragile and needy kids, it's kids with significant social emotional needs, behavioral issues, and kids that can't read, and kids that can't do functional math. If we send that whole pile of kids through without that service, what does that look like in high school? What does that look like when they leave our school? Go out into the community?
So how did we service them before this?
We did not.
We did not. We just let them, what did we do? Nothing.
The classroom teacher did the best they could. They received AIS, but it's nowhere near to this level.
By adding this position, did we lower our referrals to CSE?
We have a much better handle on who truly needs CSE. We have data to back it. We can look at all the reading data, all the math data, and we look at that data constantly. We have data days, we have review on all of our kids, and you're able to say this child received this service, for 2 full years. And you can, some kids are making slow and steady growth. Fantastic. Stay where you are. That service is working for you. Some kids are completely flatlining, and this is an intensive level of service that kids are getting. And if we see that lack of progress, then we know it's time to come to CSE. And before, before we had this in place, we have our school psychologists that we do testing. That's like one tiny little snapshot. You really need more comprehensive data to make those decisions. So I feel much more confident looking at this information when making referrals to CSE.
Tracy, could the board take into consideration with the service of these individuals, we save money in special education referrals or services?
I can say absolutely, and even the counseling piece of it too. We have someone working on those behaviors with kids and working on behavior plans. And if you don't have that in place, there is no body, there is no person to work with that child or those students. And oftentimes we do have to refer out. There's no one here to do it. So absolutely.
And are these push-in, Mr. Madam, are these push-in programs, or the students go right to special class?
These are, a lot of these kids are pulled out for the Title I. Are we talking Title I now? The Title
Yes.
I? Okay. So a lot of those kids are pulled out, small group instruction with the Title I math or reading teacher, but they also do push into some classes and offer support as well.
Same in elementary. They push in and pull out. depending on student needs and classroom teachers. Sometimes they co-teach together and do lessons, and then also small group instruction as well.
And these individuals provided the instruction. They're not delegating to a teacher aide or teacher assistant.
No.
They're providing direct instruction.
Correct.
Thank you.
These positions were the ones.
Okay.
and-
Good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. So again, this would be our budget that includes those 4 positions in 24-25 for the first time. Talked about reducing our state aid based on the governor's proposal, what that does to our tax levy. We've kind of established a tax levy of 5.5% at this point in time. So 10,141,000 is what was on the prior slide. This was all presented at prior meetings, but a 5.5% would get us $9,082,000 in tax revenues. So we would have a gap of $1,059,000. We talked about this last meeting. You know, the items that are not highlighted are not directly impacting programs. We use a little bit more fund balance. We're looking at reducing some of the cushion that we may have in our special education. You know, each year, we don't know what our special education count is going to be. We know what we have today. We roll that over to September. We say, okay, let's have a little bit of money built in. Let's have some money built in there. So as the year progresses, if kids join us, we are able to absorb them without really impacting our budget too negatively. But we've shaved that down by $300,000, as you can see here. The other items I really won't go into at this point in time, but again, the items that are not highlighted don't directly impact the instructional programming. And then there's that $400,000 that still remains as a gap that we are struggling with, and will the administration will continue to brainstorm to come up with how we will reconcile that. Part of that we are hoping is when a final state budget is adopted, that number that the governor had proposed for us is increased for our foundation aid. So you can see again, her foundation aid reduced her proposal reduces our foundation aid by 1.25%. We've had 3% plus increases for each of the last 3 years. Had we gotten that again in 24-25 in her initial proposal, that would have been that $400,000 gap. So we started our budgets in October, put together some numbers. Obviously, a lot of information was unknown, but we knew that the federal money was going away, and that we knew that we wanted to make every effort we could to sustain those programs that we started during the pandemic. So that's why we started in October. And one of the assumptions I made was, okay, state aid is going to follow what it's been the last few years. Governor's proposal didn't do that. That's why we're at this $400,000 gap today. We talk about, again, the 5.5% increase. What does that mean? It raises an additional $473,000. What does that mean to the taxpayers in the community? Average household of about $140,000 in the town of Paris. It would mean about $3.59 per week to their tax bill. So all of these are, based upon current assessment and equalization rate numbers. They'll be updated in the summer of 24. But at this point in time, we're looking at certainly under $5 for each of the townships for their average household on a weekly basis of an increase to their tax bill. Another thing that we talked about, we are increasing the use of our fund balance to over $1 million for the 24-25 school year. And you can see that in the since the pandemic funding began in 2021, we have been able to build. We were at a low of $1.4 million at the end of June 30th, 2020, I believe it was. And we've been able to build that up to over $3.1 million. A lot of that has to do with the plan that we had when we were receiving the pandemic funding. Was we need to give supports for the kids, but we also want to use some of that funding to build our fund balance. So we were able to accomplish both of those goals to this point. What will that turn into in 24-25 and going forward? Can we maintain the programs that we've added? What will it do to our fund balance remains to be seen. I certainly don't expect another, $3 million of federal assistance to come along for the next 3 years as it did during the last 3. But even with that increase to our fund balance, all school districts saw a nice bump to their overall fund balance over the last 3 years. And we've always been a district that's teetering on the edge of fiscal stress. We're still at a point where you look at what we've got in fund balance in relation to our budget. We're near the bottom in comparison to the other 12 school districts, other 11 school districts in our BOCES, and also included in here are our neighbors, Mount Markham and Frankfurt Schuyler. So though we've improved nicely, things can go in the wrong direction in a hurry for us, and we don't have that real deep well that we will be able to go to for a number of years to sustain the programs. Looking at some other comparative data, when we look at what we spend per student, and this is something that the board members have the information in front of them. There's a fiscal transparency report that we send to SED each year. You can pull this information for all school districts. So went and pulled it for the 12 component school district of OHM BOCES, as well as again, Mount Markham and Frankfurt Schuyler. And when you do that, and you look at what our expenditures per pupil are of 18,591 compared to the others, we're 13th out of 14. Others spend more than we do per student as far as instructional expenditures. I know that Mr. Reed took this a step further and looked at Herkimer BOCES and Madison BOCES. You add those districts in Madison County and Herkimer County, you increase the school to 34 school districts. We still are at number 33 out of 34. There's only one school district that spends less per pupil than us. So we aren't spending lavishly, we aren't overspending, we're delivering great programs, in my opinion, for the money that we have to the kids. And the other column here, the number of teachers, or number of students per teacher, we're at 13. You can see school districts kind of in the 10, 11, 12 range primarily. So we don't have a lot of teachers bumping into each other as well. Another question that comes up is, what has our tax levy increase been? This is the tax levy increase since the tax cap began in 2012-13. The average has been 2.45%. So at that point in time, the tax cap has that legendary 2% cap on it that is adjusted for some various factors. But you can see we've basically stayed in the 2+ range. The average for the last 12 years, 2.45%. And if you take a look at us, that wasn't supposed to happen. You take a look at us. There we go. The decade prior, before there was a tax cap and the board was able to assess a levy that was necessary to maintain the programs or run the programs that that were developed by the administration. You can see for that 10-year period, the average was more than double, 5.16% for that 10-year period. So, our revenues from taxes do not keep up with the cost of inflation, the cost of health insurance, the cost of employee benefits, the cost of salaries and wages at this point in time. As an average needs school district, in a school district whose foundation aid is at best been 3%, 3% does not keep up with those other cost factors as well. As was stated by somebody in the audience last week, we should be looking at higher numbers. That perhaps is true. And we're certainly, if we stay in the 2% range, state aid and tax levy increases, and our expenditure budget continues to grow by just normal increases, we're probably headed back to a fiscal stress district as we've been in the past. Let's see if we can get through this. Last slide that I really have is a couple of items. On the agenda tonight for the board are a couple of resolutions for them to determine how they want to present votes for our school buses. Each year, we do a separate resolution, a separate referendum for the approval of school buses. To this point, it's always been however many buses we've needed, obviously diesel buses. The new mandates that are in place now saying that, in the law right now, saying that starting in 2027, the buses that you buy need to be electric buses, and by 2035, all buses in your fleet need to be electric buses. So do we start attacking that now or not? And that's a question for the board to determine and debate maybe a little bit later in the meeting. But just to let you know, what they do have in front of them is two different action items. One would be, okay, let's go out and put the proposition forth as we always have, 2 buses that'll be diesel buses, cost us no more than $350,000. And maybe add a second resolution that would say, let's buy 1 electric bus and 1 diesel bus. The diesel buses cost about $420,000. There is funding available, EPA grants, NYSERDA grants available that would bring that down to the same cost as a diesel bus at this time. It's the reason that we're presenting it to the board for their discussion. There's also, as we all know, opposition to the movement to electric buses, and is it even feasible in upstate New York or in much of New York? So where that will end up in 27, I'm not sure. I just know what the rules are right now. It's something for the board to make a final decision on. Lastly, I talked about this last time. I want to make sure that I do bring it up again. You know, we want to bring back the $100,000 capital outlay project. It's part of the regular budget. We do include that. And we've got some additional debt service monies that we've been able to generate from interest earned through this recent capital project. So it would have no impact to the taxpayers to be able to resume the $100,000 capital outlay project in 24-25, something we put delayed in 23-24, but had done the prior 2 years. And with that, I kind of hit the highlights of where we are at today. Again, not a lot of new information, waiting on New York State more than anything at this point in time, but certainly I'll tell you the administration is doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that if that $400,000, and likely won't all come from New York State, that there will be a plan in place that they can present to the Board of Education for their decision. Any questions from anyone at this point in time?
About the $100,000 outlay project, what's targeted?
For that, we would look to, in the last two, what we've done is replace doors in the middle school, which had interior doors, which had large windows. We reduced them to small windows that were more shatterproof and more difficult to see into. We'd be moving to the middle school for that, or excuse me, to the elementary school. And I misspoke because we did elevators with the two projects. What we've done in the middle school is address that through general fund money, about $25,000 a year. We're looking to take a bigger chunk of that out of the elementary school.
What if Mr. Putnam said he could wait a year and we saved $100,000?
It would sit in our debt service fund and wouldn't help our tax levy at all. Wouldn't help anything at all. No. Money that can be used towards debt service or towards capital projects, and it sits there. So the idea is let's get back on track, earn the 89%, $89,000 on the 100 spent, and try to get back to doing those types of projects. Questions?
Is the 89 that comes back going to the general fund, or is it going to the debt service?
General fund, building in.
Michelle, what was your question?
Does the 80, if you spend the $100,000 to help with the doors in the elementary school, does the $89,000 and 8 that comes back go into that same fund? So you can't spend it because it's going to the general fund. So spend the $100,000 on the doors to help them de-escalate those, say, get an $80,000 rebate in your general fund next year. So it actually helps you save.
Yeah, the idea is we got to find that seed money, and the funds that we've earned in interest from this capital project allowed us to generate that seed money this year, the $100,000. And once that's there, you know, the 89,000 will come the following year in the general fund. It's easy to say we'd like to continue to do capital outlay projects, but it's also easy to say, hey, we can use that money to keep a teacher too. So you really don't know how it will be used from year to year. This is a time where we do have an opportunity to at least get back into it in 24-25.
And Charlie, for as long as you've been here, I don't believe you've ever advocated to use such a large amount for fund balance. We're always worried. Are we being a little too aggressive this year?
Well, I think that, you know, we've always had 727, we've gone to 827,000 the last couple of years, attempting to build into the budget enough so that we don't truly use that much. And obvious, well, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but the fact of the matter is, even though we say we're going to appropriate 727,000, we're going to appropriate $727,000, these numbers continue to grow because we had money from the grants that helped us offset the, you know, that the use of fund balance, as well as we know that we budget a little bit more in certain areas, health insurance, whatever the case may be. And we hope that we don't get slammed with any huge unexpected costs. And that's worked out very well for us the last 3 years. The plan has kind of come together. The money's there now. Certainly not advocating for using $1 million, but appropriating it is what would be necessary to balance the budget at this point in time. I do expect that instead of seeing kind of a trajectory upwards in 24, 25, and going forward. We're gonna level out, maybe dip a little bit, but, that's something to monitor. If it's losing $300,000, $400,000 a year, would scare me. But I fully anticipate 24, 25 that we would lose a couple $100,000 or under, based on the information right now.
So you're comfortable.
Comfortable as I can be. I'd rather not, but what can you do? I mean,
Because now we're starting off next year with that deficit already. What we use this year, we have to match for next year.
we would generally match that. Yes. No. You are correct.
Board members, any questions? Oh, yeah, I'm asking too many questions.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, John.
Going to turn it over to our library people. There's
Like
a
the library.
action item for the board tonight, so the library can talk about that. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Doreen Brennan Moore. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the Cleveland Library. This is Becky Hassett. She's our library director. And we petitioned the school district for a 259 vote to get more stable funding for our library. Generally, we have relied in the past on funds from the town of Paris, the village of Clayville mainly, and our annual fund drive. We get very little funding from the county or the state. So we can't always rely on what we get from the town of Paris. Or they've always been very generous to us and stuff, but times are hard for everybody. So we want to put this vote to the community to see if they would fund us through tax levy.
For instance, the village of Clayville has already told us that they will not be able to fund us as they have in the past. So they're already reducing our allotment of how much they give us already for the coming year.
Right. We were very encouraged when the town of Paris did their survey, and it came back very positive for the Clayville Library. A lot of people felt that we should get more funding. So we felt this was probably the time that we tried to put this proposition on. And we're going to have a separate vote on April 16th. You have frequently asked questions that were passed around as far as what the vote is. The proposition is on the back. Does anybody have any questions as far as what it is?
We've been trying to separate ourselves as much as possible from the school budget vote, because we are well aware of the fact of the conditions we're facing this year. So we're trying as hard as we can to kind of make it a separate vote, a separate month, separate as much as possible.
But the amount that we're asking for is $889,775 dollars. Yeah.
And that would replace the town of Paris funding, the village of Clayville funding, our annual fund drive, and the 7,000 other fund drives and fundraisers that we do every year. That should give us enough to continue with our current salaries.
Right.
And our books and movies and programming.
Maintaining our building. Does anybody have any questions?
Several of us had talked. This could be a benefit to us as well. With the support of the library and the community, hopefully they'll come out and support our needs here at school as
Right.
well.
I'm very happy to support the school district.
As I mentioned to Mr. Cowan at one of our meetings, we had a petition out on the counter for people to sign, and of course it brings up the school budget and everything else. I heard no negative comments about the school budget, about the money or anything. In general, taxes, everything is too high, but in general, the school budget was not talked about or referenced or referred to in any negative way at all.
And most of the people signing our petition, of course, were very supportive of the library. But at the same time, once it was actually explained to them that it wasn't part of the school budget, that the school merely collected the money and then gave it back to us or gave it to us, there was little or no negative about the school budget at all. Now, I don't know that they've seen this, what you're currently going through, but there didn't seem to be much negativity at all about the school or the school budget. So I think that's a good, positive.
I would just like to say, as a supporter of the library, and as Dory alluded to, the comprehensive survey, I mean, there's always positive feedback. I spend a lot of time with the library, I'm with the relationship with the vice president. And patrons of the library are always commenting on what a hidden gem it is. And if you haven't been, you should check it out. It's not just a room full of books, but it's a beautiful church, and there's just a lot of character to it, and that patrons are really impressed with the offering of the library. So.
And really, libraries are becoming more community-centered than just a place to get a book. Because you can get a book online now for free through the library and read it. You don't even have to come into the library. But a lot of people still do. We've got our community rooms and
With durable medical equipment,
snowshoes, and a bunch of different stuff. And this year we won a grant for outdoor sports equipment for kids. We've got 2 adaptive bikes, 2 regular bikes with helmets. We've got fishing poles coming in, pickleball, all different kinds of badminton, everything coming in. Kids can check out, bring it home, or play in our backyard. So making it a place where they can really.
Voting in conjunction with the school district at the same time, et cetera, is very common in small towns.
Yeah.
I'm surprised we haven't done it much sooner.
We tried it twice, and I think it was 2003 and 2004 to get onto this 259 funding thing. And we were shot down both times. One time by 4 votes. So we were all pretty discouraged about that, and we didn't pursue it until this past year, when we were getting such positive feedback and people were asking us, how do you get your funding? Do you have enough funding? All this kind of thing. And then when the town affairs survey came, we thought, no, now's the time to try it again.
it was a tight year for us.
Yeah, we just made it.
Barely.
But separating it, we thought would be better for us too. Because the people, hopefully, the people that show up to vote are supporters. Is what we're hoping for. Just because we were burned twice before, at the same time. So
I have a question. I'm just trying to understand this completely. So the 89,775 will essentially kind of go alongside the school budget vote. And then every year, this will vote on it every year?
No.
So this is just a one-year thing that you guys are asking to do?
The proposition is a one-time thing.
Okay,
The money would be assured every year until we needed to change it, increase it, or whatever.
Okay.
And then we'd have to go through the same process.
and this goes out to everyone in the district?
In the school district.
In the school district, okay, all right, thank you.
So the increase, it looks like if you have $100,000 house, you're looking at an increase of $25
Right. It's the cost of
for
it.
the service
So
that you
they
guys provide, right?
It's actually less.
Which
than
seems
cost.
right, yeah. Which seems reasonable, not to push anything, but like, I know you.
I have no idea what the average home cost is in the town of Paris, probably 150,000 maybe, something like that. There was a figure of 55, so $25, $35 a year.
Anything else? Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Presentations technology.
Yes, we have with us tonight Roletto Heath Company, our technology department. They're going to give us a little presentation on their programming.
Wherever you want. So keep it under 4 minutes.
So while Charlie's getting presentation, I want to introduce myself. I'm Joe Roletto. I teach technology and engineering education here at Sequoia. I've been here for about 20 years now. This is Heath Company. Also teaches technology and engineering here at Sequoia. And I guess before we go into all this, I'll explain kind of what technology and engineering is, because it's a lot of people think it's just computers, or it's wood shop, or it's design or engineering. It's all that. Okay, it's all that. So we're going to kind of go through, talk about each of the individual courses that we teach, and we'll answer any questions that you have after that. So up on the screen, you'll see a list of all the courses that we currently teach. And we'll kind of go through a little bit of those specifics in each one. But the first two, 7th and 8th grade technology, that is actually, they're two separate courses, but it's really one full year course. What we do is we alternate that with family consumer science, 20 weeks and 20 weeks. So what I'll do is I'll have the 7th graders for the first 20 weeks of the school year, and then they will go to home careers, and then I'll get the 8th graders for the second half of the year. So really, it's a full year course that we offer. It's just taught in 2 20-week sections. And what we do there is we really go through all the rest of the stuff that you see up on the screen. It's kind of an introductory course for all the stuff that's offered at the high school. We talk about design, we build bridges, we talk about the engineering design process, what it takes to design something and create something from scratch. We also talk about different types of physics, basic physics, 4 forces of flight. So we kind of try to hit on a lot of the main principles of each of those things that you see up on the screen below 7th and 8th grade technology.
Okay. Construction systems is basically it's residential structures. We talk about framing for a house. We go through all the layout of the walls, cutting studs, framing around doors. We get into roofing. We put on, we make small sheds that they can, just the model's a larger structure, but the concept is the same. We start the course off by going through all the tool safety that you'd have like on a typical construction site, chop saws, circular saws, drills, go through all the safety concepts of that. And that's a half-year course. So they meet every other day. Energy systems meets every other day also. There we go through everything from home heating solutions that you might have, different types of home heating solutions, to power electrical generation, how cars are powered, how electricity is powered, and the different fuel sources that they have, from diesel, natural gas, coal, and then we get into geothermal, solar, wind, nuclear. So we talk about all the different types of energy systems and how they kind of impact your everyday life, and why it's important to kind of have an understanding of what they are. So when you see prices go up, what's that going to do to you, like transportation costs, things like that, how they're all kind of tied together. So those 2 classes are both half-year courses that we teach in high school.
So those are our kind of like our basic systems courses and introductory courses. So could you switch to the next slide? So I'm going to go through the rest of the stuff, but they kind of have different individual things I want to pull out and show you. So actually, if you want to talk about DDP.
DDP is typically what freshmen and some sophomores will take. It's a design class. It will give you an art music requirement for graduation if you do take that. But basically, we go through everything from blueprint reading, we use computer-aided drafting, CAD program. We go through the design process, what a design brief is, how it works, constraints, standards, learn what those are, how they're tied in together. Then they make models and prototypes of different things that we create in that class. We have done 3D printing in the past. We will do that again here in the next few weeks. So they do make models with that. They do make computer generated models. We do a few things in the shop as far as bridge building, so we kind of understand the truss concepts, how that works. And again, some basic engineering principles with that. So that's a year-long course, BDP is, and that's, like I said, that's typically freshmen and sophomores who take that, while others have taken it.
So the next two, principles of engineering and digital electronics. What we do with those courses is we alternate them every other year. So currently, right now, we're teaching principles of engineering. And then next year, we'll teach digital electronics. And in 2 years, we'll go back to principles of engineering. This way, it kind of gives the opportunity for, especially like a district our size, it gives as much variation as possible, and gives kids as much opportunity to take different courses and that kind of setup. So in principles of engineering, we talk about different engineering concepts. We talk about robotics and automated systems. Currently, right now, we're doing a problem where students have to create a robot. They have to move different colored balls around and put them into a bucket. Then they also have to program it to do the same thing. So we do different types of design and engineering activities like that. In digital electronics, we're fortunate enough where we partner up with Mohawk Valley Community College. We offer dual college credit for that course. And in that course, we talk about logic gates, basic electricity. We also talk about designing circuits, what capacitors do, what resistors do. And we line it up with MBCC's curriculum. So anybody that takes that and gets a B or higher, they're able to get college credit for that course. Also, I will say that principles of engineering, I had it just for principles of engineering, but principles and digital both are available for a third unit of math and science. So a student can take 2 years of a math or a science, and then supplement principles of engineering or digital electronics for a third year for that math or science. So before I'm going to have Mr. Kennedy talk about computer science, this is a new course that we offered starting this year. It's 4 10-week units where we're fortunate enough to get Mrs. Babby and Mr. Eisinger to help us out with this, where we teach the 4 things you see up on the screen. So I'll let Mr. Kennedy talk about computer science.
So computer science, we do, first we introduce the network, how a network works. So they walk up, they can see the switch rooms and server rooms here, how they all kind of integrated, how computers talk, everything from your phone or computer talks to the outside world, through the servers and switches, and kind of get a basic understanding how the stuff works, networking. And then we get into coding, where they code, and we're only for 10 weeks, so it's a very introductory type of course, exposure type thing. So they get to code some apps and stuff like that on the computer, and then they do some career exploration into cybersecurity, web design, basic programming. So they spend about a week just doing some career exploration type of thing and seeing where you could get some of these locally, as far as if you want to pursue that in a local college, where should you go to get those types of programs? So that's what the computer science part is. So we have for 10 weeks, and then they rotate through. So each kid is in each one of those sections for 10 weeks, and they rotate around.
So the next one, emerging technologies, what that course does is it really kind of just touches the surface of a lot of different types of fields. AI, we talked a little bit about AI with that. We talked a little bit about what cryptocurrency is and what NFTs are. We also talked about 3D printing, what basic 3D printing looks like, what it's used for. We also talked about a little bit of cybersecurity. There's a lot of different, maybe 7 or 8 different units that we just kind of spend 4 or 5 days on and just kind of touch the surface on and briefly talk about, have a little discussion about. Digital literacy. That course is a course where it's taught. You want to talk about it? Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I always say that they're the dad class, I'm the mom class, so just because you can, doesn't mean you should. So I'm the intersection of social media, cell phone use, generative AI, all of these things that are out there. How are they impacting you and how are they impacting our society? So we look at those things, and we look at the impacts that they have on our brains, our behavior, our choices, what's behind the scenes that's going into all of that. And then how can you make different choices with regard to how you're using all of those things? So that just because you can doesn't mean you should, kind of question.
Yeah, perfect. And nanotechnology, I probably can't speak as eloquently as Mr. Isaac about it, but I know he talks about semiconductors, what a nanoparticle actually is, and there's nanotechnology involved in many things that you wouldn't think nanotechnology is involved in. Car wax is one.